Good morning. It's actually 5:55 in the morning, 5:55 here in San Francisco, California, and doing some of my morning tuning, some of the practices, some of the things I do as soon as I wake up to tune myself. And this has become so huge in how I handle myself and my mood and my focus and my vibe, and really loving to share with you my understanding of this and why I'm so into this idea of tuning ourselves and how it can help us absolutely with things like our focus, our feelings, and a lot more flow. So I love to help you see that what we're doing in our mornings especially matters, because when we wake up, we've got a fresher start energetically and with our focus, but we often, pretty soon after we wake up, we might remember that one thing that we're worrying about in life, right? Or the thing we went to bed thinking about that isn't great, or remembering something from yesterday, or worrying about something today or tomorrow or in the future, right? So for a lot of us, pretty soon after we wake up, even though sleeping, we've had a chance to even quiet that mind, refresh, and even reconnect more spiritually, if we believe in that. But still, we wake up, right? And pretty quickly, we probably start to notice the thing that we might be worried about, right? Or wondering about or remembering. It doesn't feel great. And so right away, we're dealing with ourselves, right? But we can also start to see that everything that we're doing from the minute that we wake up is having an effect, right? On our focus, our feelings, and our vibe. So however we wake up feeling, whether or not we're feeling good or bad, whether or not we've got something we're worried about that is already starting to pull our focus, already starting to affect our feelings, already having an impact on our vibe, right? Our energy, which if you're into the ideas of like law of attraction and that we're creating and attracting more of whatever energy we're in. So yeah, vibe being important and part of what we're working with and changing with what we're doing in our mornings, especially. So whatever you're doing from the time you wake up, whether you're here on social media, whether you're reading things, whether you're listening to things, whatever you're doing is starting to have that tuning effect, right? On your focus, on your feelings, and on how much you're going to be ready to flow today. So I'm just loving to share that there are all sorts of things that we can see have their effects on us, and really that everything, like I said, everything you're listening to, everything you're watching, everything you're reading is having an effect on these elements, right? So that's where you can start to play with. Like for me, it's a lot about things like music. I use music a lot because it's its own amazing vibrational tool, right? And especially when I listen to music that I particularly like. So I listen to music a lot. Or I have a lot of time I'm spending on YouTube, or at least some time, most mornings, listening to some teacher or teachings that help tune me, right? With my focus, with my feelings, and how much I'm gonna be ready to flow. And what I'm understanding about flow, which I'm so interested in, fascinated in, about, is what is flow and how does that work and how do we get into flow? And it's a lot of what we're doing here with our focus and our feelings and our presence and our ability to listen more within, get into that spiritual guidance, that intuitive guidance, and start to live more like that. That's a lot of what flow is. So our morning tuning absolutely is what's going to tune us to be more receptive, to be more tapped in, tuned in, and ready to be in our day, even seeing it as like a more of a collaboration with, whether we see it with our higher self or with the universe or God or spirit, whatever we like to see we're doing with the spiritual realms, that we can see that our morning tuning especially is 100% part of whether or not we're going to be in that receptive mode to be more in flow, to live more in flow. So, absolutely having an effect on that receptivity and that awareness that can help us live like that. So, yeah, what we're doing in our mornings, absolutely tuning us. So, whether it's what we're listening to with music, I like to use teachings on YouTube, picking up books that I'm into, even just a few sentences can change our day, right? And really hone our focus. That's where I love my friends who love to study the Bible, who could study just one verse, right? Just one sentence could change your day, right? So that's what we really want to pay attention to everything that we are focusing on and bringing into our days, because it is having an effect on our focus. And that's one of the things we're really working with and playing with here is our focus. And one of the reasons is because whatever we focus on grows stronger, right? It's very real that there's a thing called momentum. So when we're dealing with things with the mind, thought patterns, worries, right? Or even mood, mood patterns that we might get ourselves in, right? Which are related to those thought patterns. So if we're interested in changing that, transforming that, having a different experience, this I'm seeing can be a great way. But some of the elements that are important are we wake up and yeah, we are just giving ourselves a chance to first of all tune in to how we are feeling, how we are doing, what are we thinking about, what are we feeling about, what are we focusing on. So that's step one, is just the tuning in. So that's where just time listening to ourselves and just being in that mode more is helpful. So we could call that any form of meditation, but even something like listening to music, or even as we're making our morning coffee, we could just be in that mode of listening to ourselves, just tuning into how we're doing, how we're feeling. Even the minute that we're waking up in bed, we could be starting to be more in that observer mode, bringing in that like meditative approach right away to just notice how we're doing, how we're thinking, how we're focusing, how we're feeling. And then what makes it bearable and even more therapeutic is we're invited to bring in non-judgment and even more like self-love with what we're noticing. And we can also see that's a lot of what we're doing though with our practices, is tuning ourselves back into that non-judgment, back into that self-love, back into more of a spiritual approach even, or perspective, more connected perspective. And that's going to be a lot of what is going to shift us, right? And lift us and change our focus, our feelings, and our vibe. So that tuning in to just notice how we're feeling and doing is a big part of what we can do in our mornings with that self-love that's going to be part of owning more of our focus, our feelings, and our vibe. So just giving ourselves a chance to just notice how we're doing with love, right? And that's where things like I use journaling is one of my biggest practices. And I do things like morning pages from the Artist's Way, and that really helps me each day. It's a form of meditation on the page, just writing 3 pages longhand to just take a look at what's going on in my mind, dump it on the page, clear my mind, helps me get more quiet to almost let it out, put it on the page. It's also very grounding to write and centering, and tunes me in to how I'm doing, right? After those 3 pages, I'm more aware of how I'm doing, how I'm feeling, how I'm focusing, and ready to work with that. And also you can see that things like journaling are absolutely a spiritual practice, because as you're writing, you're talking to someone, right? Whether you're talking to yourself or an aspect of yourself, or you start to realize and feel like you're talking to the universe, to God, to spirit, whatever you call it, that's what your journaling can be, or any form of meditation, and of course prayer. And that's where, yeah, and I love even just, that's where things like that relate to flow. And speaking of flow, I'm thinking of teacher Florence Scovel Shin, who helped me understand that like prayer is our talking to God or spirit or the universe or ourself, our higher self, right? So when we have those moments of prayer, which could even be in the journal, right? And then intuition is where we start to get where God, spirit aspect of ourselves talks to us. So that's why we want to get in this listening mode to live more spiritually and to be more in flow, because that's where we are listening for that guidance, right? And often it's just like the little things that we realize we're excited about, that we're imagining, even just for our day and what's next in the choices that we have. So that's a whole nother video about how to live like that, and definitely what I'm into right now and exploring. But just the importance of the morning tuning, and how it gives you that chance to just tune into how you are doing, how you are feeling, so you can work with that, honor that, and yes, change that. That's the best part. And not that it's not about allowing the feelings and feeling the feelings, and it actually is a lot about that, so that we can feel better. So often our practices are going to tap us into the hard feelings, and we might even be doing things like crying during our journaling or our meditation, or that listening with ourselves. But we could see that that is actually helpful and healing, to feel the feelings, to in order to free the feelings, and to transmute those feelings as energy, and even the benefits of tears with that serotonin release and the mood boost and the energy release, right? So, and then again, better to have faced those feelings, felt those feelings, freed those feelings, versus doing what we probably have been doing in the past, which is stuffing them down, pushing them down, numbing ourselves, distracting ourselves, right? So we wouldn't feel them, even though they're probably the reason for some of our not great feelings, right? Or even things like anxiety, depression, right? So we're doing a lot of powerful work with these practices, absolutely taking care of ourselves mentally and psychologically, doing our own therapy for ourselves, for our mind, for the body, interestingly, right? And then, yeah, the whole spiritual aspect is some of the biggest medicine. If we just want to get into that, that our morning tuning is about reconnecting spiritually, right? So that we go into the day remembering how we want to be going at life. You know, what do we really want to be believing and embracing and embodying with how we're approaching our days and our relationships and ourselves and our moments, right? Because when we're remembering the ways that we really want to focus and feel, like faith and love, right? And bringing that to ourselves and our lives, that is really what's going to change. And then what if we let that become our focus? And how do we feel when we're in those energies and that focus? And then, yeah, our feelings tell us that the vibe we're in, and we're more in. And then another great practice is gratitude, right? Appreciation. We're almost sick of hearing about it, but it's amazing how every religion, every tradition recommends it. And so even just gratitude, even if we didn't do anything else, but just add more gratitude, appreciation to our mornings, that alone, whether we're just thinking about what we're thankful for, whether we're thinking about what we're thankful for within a hard situation, whether we're writing about it. I do that too every day. I do gratitude lists about various things. It's a huge tool for all these three things. Really is going to change our focus, really is going to change how we feel, and really is going to change our vibe. And it's really going to reconnect us spiritually every time we get back into gratitude and appreciation. Because not only does it just feel better, and it does change our focus so that we're actually focusing more on what feels good, what we're thankful about, and thus we're actually in a different energy now and vibration, meaning we're starting to attract more things to be thankful for. So there's a real practicality to it with things like law of attraction, but also spiritually, because we can see that that's the vibe, that's the focus, that's the feeling, that whether we see it again as our true self, our heart, our soul, our higher self, or our God, our sense of spirit, our sense of the universe, our spirit team, that's the vibe that spirit is in, is that gratitude vibe. So that's another reason it feels so good and is such a great focus and such an amazing vibe and vibe changer, is because that's the spiritual vibe, the spiritual focus is gratitude. So yeah, hope that's helpful to you. And then fascinating how things like movement, right, getting us back in the body, because the body is such a source of that guidance and such a big important part of how we're managing our energy, right? So when we also do things to manage our energy with things like movement and breath, even the simplest things, and even manage the fact that we're always picking up other people's energy, right? And then again, just really getting better at noticing how we're focusing and how much that impacts how we feel, and thus is creating our vibe. So that's a lot of what we're doing with our tuning, is tuning our focus, working with our attention, our awareness, really getting to impact things like our psychology and our perspectives, right? And our spiritual connection. How exciting is that? And all through just owning the power of our focus, our feelings, and that we do play a role in how we feel, right? Like it's important to honor the feelings, to notice the feelings, to have ways that we're continuing to tap into and notice how we're feeling, get better at that non-judgment, that self-love, bringing that in, letting ourselves feel the feelings more, letting ourselves cry a lot more and laugh, right? But also how much that's going to change how we feel and lift how we feel and just help us just generally feel better, which we deserve to feel. And we could see that when we do feel better, it does go with more of a sense of spiritual alignment. And so it goes both ways. We can change our physiology like we do with things like poses, breath, but also what's happening in the mind, right? So we can do things with the body that are going to impact us in the mind, that are going to be part of all this focus, feelings, and vibe and spiritual connection. But then also the spiritual connection is going to impact all those things as well, right? Just really change how we're thinking and focusing and feeling when we're remembering how we're wanting to look at life, like things like that Einstein quote alone, whether we believe that the universe is a friendly place or not, right? And I struggle with that one too. Like I feel like intellectually I like to think and feel and focus in faith, and I can really see how things have always worked out and I've always been so blessed. But then I can still see myself worrying, right? And acting as if I don't believe the universe is a friendly place, right? And sometimes coming at life in that way, and that's really impacting my nervous system, right? My physiology, definitely changing how I'm focusing, how I'm feeling, and my vibe. So that's where I appreciate my morning practices, to just help me notice when I'm doing that, help me get better at the non-judgment and self-love, which is a more spiritual thing to do, which just that alone too really changes my focus and feelings and vibe, right? Is that non-judgment and self-love. And just, yeah, back to love, back to faith as the focus and the way I want to feel and the best way to be in flow. So I hope that's helpful for you. Yeah, just loving sharing how what we're doing in our mornings especially is so important, how we're tuning ourselves and how it's going to impact it all. And you already have a morning routine, you're doing something. So I just invite you to look at what you are doing with your mornings, how that is impacting how you're focusing, feeling, and what vibe you're in. And just playing with what might help you focus differently, feel differently, get into a different vibe, and that those elements all impact each other, right? And that we do have a power in how we feel, and that it's important that we take care of how we feel and not dwell in the hard, dark feelings. It's important to feel them, right? And allow them, but we don't want to dwell. It's important that we see how important our focus is and how we feel and our vibe, because it is absolutely creating it all, right? Not only our physical health, our mental health, but also our experience in life and relationships and what we feel is possible. So it's huge, and I'm so thankful to share with you, and hope that's helpful to you along your journey. See you soon, y'all. Namaste.